Vienna, 1911. Just as the last snow melted off the red-tiled roofs of the Hofburg Palace stables and the city's carriages rattled back to life, the court laughed when they heard who Princess Thalina had chosen. Laughter behind gloves, behind gold-rimmed coffee cups, behind closed doors. They called him a groom boy, a stable rat, a ghost of horse dung and saddle oil. And when he walked through the palace courtyard in his worn boots and threadbare coat, they didn't whisper. They laughed aloud. But none of it ever reached her ears. Or rather, it did, and she didn't care. Soren Sheffield had been 17 when he first came to the imperial stables, an orphan from New York whose mother had died aboard the steamship and whose father had vanished in Prague. No one quite remembered how he got the job. Some said a count owed his uncle a favor. Others said he lied about his age and forged a letter from the American consulate. But by 23, he'd become trusted with the Empress's Andalusians, the Prince Imperial's hunting greys, and unofficially Princess Thalina's infamous black mare, Vesper. That's where it began. She was 20, stubborn, and rode like she was born with reins in her hands. Vesper had bucked off every groom assigned to her until Soren stepped in with quiet hands and a pail of apples. By spring, Thalina was riding daily. By midsummer, she was arriving at the stables before breakfast, hair braided simply, eyes bright. And by early autumn, she'd begun asking for Soren by name. "I don't want anyone else," she told the master of horse one morning, standing beside Vesper, half-gloved hands smoothing the mare's flank. "He understands her." The master of horse bowed and said nothing, but later that evening, he told Soren to keep his distance. "She's a princess," he warned, "and you're a boy with no name." But Soren stayed, and Thalina kept coming. One morning, she arrived before sunrise, a silk scarf around her head, and a letter folded in her glove. "I need a favor," she whispered, pressing the paper into his hand. "It's a duel challenge." He stared at her. "A duel? My cousin Otto insulted me. Said I'd never marry, that no man with honor would take a woman who rides like a man and speaks like a professor." "Why not tell your father?" "Because my father agrees with him." Soren looked down at the letter. The ink was smudged, but still legible. "A duel at dawn, in the Imperial Gardens, pistols or sabers. Signed by Thalina Kessler of House Habsburg, sealed with her personal crest." "You're serious," he said. "I am. And you want me to deliver this?" "No. I want you to stand for me." He blinked. "You mean, fight?" "I can't fight him myself. But I want you to take my place. You're the only one I trust." Soren should have said no. It wasn't just illegal, it was treason. But then she looked at him not like a princess, not like a girl playing games, but like someone who'd been alone too long, someone tired of being told she was too much, too loud, too strange. "I'll do it," he said. The duel was set for 3 mornings later in the East Garden, just beyond the hedge maze. Otto showed up in a velvet coat and boots polished to a mirror shine, his second yawning beside him. Soren arrived in a linen shirt and riding trousers. No second, no title, no name. "You sent a servant?" Otto scoffed. "This is beneath me. I sent someone braver than you," Thalina said from behind the hedge, her voice cold. Otto's sneer faltered. "You'll regret this." They chose sabers. The fight was fast, ugly. Soren took a shallow cut to the arm, but landed a hard blow to Otto's thigh, sending him crashing into the gravel. The second declared Soren the winner. Otto limped away, red-faced and silent. It should have ended there. But the court found out. And when they did, the laughter turned cruel. "Princess Thalina's champion is a stable boy," they cried in salons and ballrooms. "A peasant swordsman. A groom with manure on his boots." Thalina didn't flinch. She walked into the winter ball with her head high, wearing the imperial sapphire tiara and a gown of deep blue silk. When the first waltz began, she crossed the floor and held out her hand to him. Soren stood frozen, the ballroom falling into stunned silence around him. "You can dance, can't you?" she asked, eyes glittering. He took her hand. They danced. Every noble watched in disbelief as she twirled in his arms, smiling like there was no one else in the room. When the music ended, she didn't let go. They left the ballroom together, arm in arm, past rows of stiff-backed nobles and pale-faced dowagers. She didn't speak until they reached the marble corridor outside. "You didn't let them scare you," she said softly. "Neither did you." She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her gaze shifted. He didn't move. Neither did she. Then she kissed him. It was quick, nervous, and entirely unprincess-like, but it was real. From that night, the court didn't just mock. They warned. Letters were sent to her father. The empress summoned her. Threats were made in velvet-wrapped words. But Thalina didn't stop seeing him. And Soren didn't leave. They met in the early mornings, behind the stables. In the chapel's cloister, under the third arch. In the music room, when no one was listening. No promises, no declarations. Just glances, touches, a shared breath before parting. But it wasn't enough. Not for long. "Marry me," she whispered one night, her fingers brushing his jaw. "Thalina, I mean it. We'll find a way." He wanted to believe her. But the Empire wasn't kind to love like theirs. The first snow of December fell in silence over the Schönbrunn gardens, weighing the bare branches and softening the clipped edges of the hedges. Soren stood beneath the eastern arcade, his coat patched at the elbow, the inside seam mended by his own hand. Thalina had asked him to meet her there, but she hadn't come. Not yet. He shifted his weight, gloved fingers brushing the cold stone column. A footman passed without acknowledging him. That was new. Before, they might have muttered, might have offered a sneer. Now, they did not see him at all. When she finally arrived, her boots left no sound on the flagstones. She wore no jewels, no fur, only a wool cloak clasped with a bronze pin shaped like a hawk in flight. Her hands were bare. "I had to slip away during Vespers," she said. "They're watching me more closely now." "Did they threaten you?" "They called it guidance. Then they locked away my riding schedule and reassigned my maid." He watched her tighten the cloak beneath her chin, the wind tugging at the hem. "I heard they canceled your lessons with the Hungarian tutor," he said. She nodded. "That tutor refused to return. Said I was no longer suitable company for his instruction." "You're a princess." "Not the right kind," she replied. He touched the worn leather strap of his satchel, looking out over the frozen fountain beyond the arcade. "It won't stop. Not unless you give them what they want." "I'm not made for that kind of obedience," she said. "Not anymore." The stillness between them was weightier than silence. Then she reached into the folds of her cloak and handed him a folded parchment sealed in dark green wax. "What is it?" "A land deed. Near Salzburg. It's in your name." He stared at her, startled. "What are you talking about? If they force me to marry someone else, you'll have something. A place. You won't be left with just memories." "I don't want land, Thalina. I want you." She stepped back. "You might not get both." "No," he said, more firmly now. "You don't get to give me a quiet cottage and walk away like we were something soft and passing." Her voice dropped. "You think I want that? You think I haven't lain awake every night wondering how to burn down the rules they nailed into our bloodlines?" He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were tired. Not from sleep, but from fighting battles with no swords. "You know what they'll do if we force this," he said. "They'll exile me. Strip your titles. Maybe worse." She took his hand. Her fingers were cold to the bone. "Then we force it," she said. That night, he waited behind the kitchen stores near the river gate. She came in a cloak with a fur-lined hood and a satchel of documents slung across her shoulder. She had braided her hair in the Tyrolean style, as if preparing for a wedding no one would attend. They crossed the city on foot, past shuttered bakeries and flickering gas lamps. No guards followed. No one looked twice. By dawn, they reached the offices of the Hungarian embassy. The ambassador, an old friend of her mother's, had agreed to meet them once. Only once. "You will lose your place at court," he warned her, adjusting his spectacles. "Your father will cut you off." "I've already been cut," she answered. The ambassador turned to Soren. "And you? Are you prepared to take her name?" "I came here to live by her side," he said. "Not behind her." A pause. Then the man dipped his pen into the ink and signed. It was not a wedding, not yet. But it was something legal. Something binding. For the next week, they disappeared. Rumors spread through the palace like spilled wine. That she'd run off with a stable hand. That she'd been kidnapped. That she'd drowned herself in the Danube. That a Russian count had taken her to Kiev. None were true. They stayed in a widow's attic near Maria Hilfer Strasse, where the bed creaked and the ceiling leaked, but no one knew their names. She read aloud from a single book she had brought, a volume of Rilke's poems. He lit the fire each morning with scraps from the market and pressed her cold feet against his calves until she warmed. On the 9th day, they were found. It wasn't a raid. No soldiers. Just the Empress's private secretary, her Erhard, waiting by the baker's stall where Soren bought bread. Her Majesty requests an audience, Erhardt said. Is it a command? Soren asked. It is a request, the man repeated. Thalina agreed without hesitation. They returned to the palace at nightfall. No trumpets. No procession. The Empress received them in her private drawing room, a chamber of shadowed tapestries and burning sandalwood. She did not embrace her daughter. She did not look at Soren. You have humiliated your house, she said, and endangered everything your grandfather built. Thalina did not flinch. Then let me repair it, she said, by marrying him. Publicly. Here. The Empress raised her chin, eyes sharp. You believe love is enough. No, Thalina said, but I do believe love is rare. And I won't abandon it for the sake of people who mock what they don't understand. The Empress was silent for a long time. Then, to Soren's astonishment, she spoke. Your great-grandmother was a laundress's daughter. She married a prince in secret. We buried their truth beneath titles. But it is still in our blood. She rose, paced once before the hearth, then turned to him. You will never be accepted, she said. Not truly. But if my daughter chooses you, I will not block her. Thalina's breath caught. Soren said nothing. He only stepped closer and took her hand. The Empress turned away. Then marry, she said, and may your love endure the scorn that will follow. The wedding was set for the first Sunday after Epiphany. There were no invitations. The guests were the court, summoned by decree. The orchestra played, but no waltz was danced. The Archbishop performed the rites with a face like stone. But when Thalina turned to Soren and placed the gold band on his calloused finger, she looked at him like the world had finally given her back something it stole. And when he kissed her, the nobles did not laugh. They stared, because for the first time, they saw the way she loved him. Not with pity, not with rebellion, but with a fierceness that made even the Empress go still. The bells of the Augustinerkirche rang long and low on the day they entered the court as husband and wife. Soren wore a tailored uniform navy wool, gold piping, and a silver aiguillette across one shoulder. The Empress had insisted on it. Not a soldier's attire, but not a servant's either. A new thing. A symbol. Thalina called it his armor, fastening the last button over his chest with a trembling thumb. You don't have to go in alone, she whispered. I never have, he said. When the doors opened, the assembled nobility stood, not in reverence, but in assessment. Eyeglasses tilted, fans stilled mid-flutter. Only Countess Margarethe of Linz offered the faintest nod from beneath her pheasant-feathered hat. No one bowed. Soren did not lower his gaze. Thalina moved beside him with quiet precision, her gloved hand resting lightly at his elbow. She wore no diamonds, only the thin gold band on her finger and a gown the color of frostbitten wisteria that caught the light like crushed silk. The chamber was silent but for the clink of sabers and the hush of skirts. After the procession, after the stiff greetings and the ceremonial toast delivered by a baron whose name neither of them remembered, Thalina drew him toward the east terrace. Don't look at them, she said softly. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch. She said I'd never be accepted. She meant they'd never be brave enough to try. He turned to her. Tell me something true. Not about them. About you. She looked toward the Danube, where the river glinted faintly in the distance like a ribbon of pewter. I almost left everything behind once. Before I met you, she said. The year I turned 19. I kept a satchel under my bed. A forged passport. 25 gold marks. I even learned how to say milk in Dutch. Why didn't you go? I read about a woman who jumped from a tower in Saxony. She left a note that said, I wanted to be known. That line haunted me. I didn't want to disappear. I wanted someone to know me truly and not ask me to change. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you are known, and you will never be alone again. Later that week, they were assigned new quarters in the East Wing, modest by palace standards, but with high ceilings and a window that overlooked the Linden courtyard. The walls were bare, the hearth unused. It smelled faintly of beeswax and old paper. She kicked off her shoes and sat on the window seat, watching the snow gather along the sill. They'll say we're playing house, she said, pretending it's something that can't last. He knelt to unlace his boots. Let them. That night, they lit no candles. She curled beside him beneath a wool coverlet, her hair loose, her breath warm against his collarbone. You know they're planning something, she murmured. Otto's allies. The Chamberlain. Even the Archbishop. I know. They'll try to challenge your right to stay at court. Then I'll give them no cause to send me. She shifted, resting her cheek over his ribs. They won't need cause. Just enough fear. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I've been afraid every day since the first time I saw you ride. But fear never stopped me. Spring arrived reluctantly, with frost still clinging to the garden statues and the linden trees stubbornly bare. The court moved toward its annual season in Baden, but Thalina remained in Vienna, citing a need to oversee her mother's hospital foundation. It was a lie, but a useful one. Soren began accompanying her to public events, small ones at first. A children's clinic, a veterans' home, a visit to the university archives, where a professor bowed so deeply he nearly lost his spectacles. No one mocked them there. Among the scholars and the wounded and the orphaned, they were not a scandal. They were something else. A question made flesh. At the spring chamber recital, held in the palace music room before 60 titled guests, Thalina took her seat in the second row. Soren stood behind her chair, hands folded, posture formal. When the violinist faltered, she leaned back slightly and whispered, He's nervous. The audience is full of wolves. Soren answered without looking down. Then he should play like they're already fed. The violinist heard and smiled. His bow steadied. After the performance, Count von Dietrich approached them near the refreshments table. He was tall, with a waistcoat stitched in lapis thread and a voice that carried. An unusual choice, princess, he said, eyeing Soren. But perhaps a necessary one. The Empire does so love its stories. Thalina raised an eyebrow. And what story do you think we're telling? Von Dietrich gave a shallow bow. A romantic one. Though I wonder how long it will hold the ending. Soren met his gaze. It isn't a story. It's a life. Von Dietrich's smile faltered. That evening, as the doors closed on the last of the guests, the Empress sent for them. She poured her own tea. No attendants remained. I received letters today, she said without preamble. From the Hungarian delegation. From Milan. From the Bishop of Graz. Thalina's hands curled in her lap. What do they want? To know if this marriage is a symbol. Or a mistake. Soren said, Tell them it's a fact. The Empress studied him. You have not asked for a title. I don't need one. Good. Because they would never give it. Thalina stood. If they force us out, we'll go. We'll build something else. The Empress raised her hand. No one is forcing you out. Then she turned to Soren. You will remain. As my daughter's consort. No title. No land. But no exile either. You will attend court functions when summoned, and you will speak only when addressed. You will never give cause for gossip. And above all, you will protect her. I already do, he said. The Empress nodded once. I know. The next afternoon, a letter was quietly posted to every royal household in the empire. It named Thalina's husband as consort in residence, confirmed by the Empress's own seal. The court did not celebrate, but they stopped whispering. And when Thalina entered the grand salon on the feast of St. Florian, hand in hand with her husband, a path opened before them, not wide, not warm, but open. Not one person laughed. Not one dared. Because they had seen. Not a stable boy. Not a scandal. But the way she looked at him. And the way he stood beside her. Unmoved. Unbowed. Loved. By late June, the lindens in the palace courtyard had gone heavy with bloom, their scent thick in the morning air. The city pulsed with the slow heat of early summer market stalls buzzing, carriages clattering in the streets, and the occasional echo of a regimental march drifting in from the Ringstrasse. Inside the palace walls, the rhythms of court moved on, brittle and unchanged, even as the shape of its future had quietly shifted. Soren kept to the margins, not by restriction, but by instinct. He spent his mornings in the imperial archives, assisting the palace historian in restoring a collection of 16th-century cavalry records. By midday, he walked the gardens alone, always ending his route beneath the copper beech where Thalina waited with a folded linen napkin and whatever pastry she'd stolen from the steward's table. She never brought the same thing twice. Today it's apricot, she said one afternoon, lifting the cloth with a grin that held no apology. He sat beside her on the stone bench, the sun dappling her skirts through the branches overhead. I saw your name in the footnotes of the new museum catalog, she added. You're cited as a contributor. Barely. Still, she said, breaking off a piece of the pastry. It's there. He paused before answering. They let me work because it keeps me out of the salons. They let you work, she said, because you do it better than anyone else. She brushed the crumbs from her lap with a practiced flick of her fingers. I've been thinking about the retreat at Bad Ischl. If we go, it might soften the Chamberlain's stance. I thought you weren't interested in appeasing him. I'm not, she said. But I'm interested in getting him out of the way. Soren leaned back, arms resting loosely across his knees. He's already sent word to the Bavarian court, asked if they'd be willing to send a cousin for another match. Thalina looked toward the palace windows. They still think I'll change my mind. Or that you'll break. I won't. I know. The silence that followed was not strained, only full. They had learned to share it without filling it. Later that week, they did travel to Bad Ischl. The imperial villa there was smaller than the Hofburg, but no less scrutinized. They arrived by train in the early morning hours, met not by fanfare, but by a single footman and a maid from the Empress's household. The staff had been instructed to show courtesy, nothing more. Thalina unpacked her dresses into the bureau herself. Soren placed his books on the table by the window, ignoring the way the maid hesitated before opening the wardrobe for his coats. The first formal event was a garden luncheon hosted by Archduchess Cecilie, who had once served as lady-in-waiting to Thalina's grandmother. She greeted them with a kiss on each cheek and led them to the table without comment. It was only once they were seated Soren beside Thalina, 3 places down from the Archduchess, that the murmurs began. Not spoken, but seen. A dropped spoon. A sideways glance. The Count of Krems, seated across, let his gaze linger too long. Thalina poured her own water. Cecilie, she said, have you made any progress on the school in Innsbruck? The Archduchess blinked, then nodded. We've broken ground. The foundation was laid last week. The curriculum, are you still planning to include Latin? Yes. And Hungarian. Good. Then I'll make a gift of the Jesuit texts from Father Albrecht's collection. He left them to me. Cecily's expression shifted, just enough to register the offer as something earned, not given. After the luncheon, as they walked the gravel path behind the villa, Thalina glanced back toward the terrace. They're waiting for us to falter, to rise too fast, or speak too boldly. Let them wait, Soren said. We'll outlast them. That evening, they dressed for the midsummer reception. Thalina wore a gown of pale green tulle threaded with gold, her hair pinned in a low twist, a single carved amber comb holding it in place. Soren adjusted his collar in the mirror, then turned to her. Do you ever wish it were simpler? He asked. I used to, she said. But then it wouldn't be ours. The reception unfolded in the ballroom with its high arched windows and glinting chandeliers. The first waltz was announced. Thalina extended her hand, as she had once before, but this time no one laughed. No one dared. They moved together without hesitation, her hand on his shoulder, his palm at her waist. The music swelled around them, but they needed no prompting. They had danced before. Not like this, never in full view, but they had learned each other's cadence long before this room would bear witness. As they turned, passing rows of watching eyes, a hush fell, not silence, but something more deliberate. The Chamberlain stood near the west pillar, flanked by minor nobility. He did not speak. And then it happened. The Count of Krems, the same who had stared at luncheon, stepped forward. He bowed, not deeply, but without irony. Consort, he said, his voice clear. May I offer my regards? Soren inclined his head. The Count turned to Thalina. And to you, your Highness. You dance as your mother once did. With certainty. Thalina's voice did not waver. Certainty is rarer than approval. I prefer it. By the time the music ended, 3 others had greeted them. Small gestures. No one offered titles. But they offered something else. Recognition. Not loud. Not unanimous. But real. Afterward, they returned to their rooms in silence. Thalina unfastened the amber comb and set it on the table. They didn't change, she said. They just stopped pretending not to see. Soren stepped behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. They saw what I see, he said. She looked up at him in the mirror, the faintest trace of warmth in her eyes. And what's that? He bent, his voice quiet. The woman I would have chosen, even if she'd been born nameless. Her breath caught, not with surprise, but with a kind of stillness that came only with being known fully. No one outside their room heard the sound of the window opening, of the night air slipping in, thick with honeysuckle and the distant murmur of late conversation. No one saw the way she leaned against him, not in exhaustion, but in ease. And no one mocked them again.